I'm Amelia, and I work alongside Nadia on the monitor stage. And this presentation is going to highlight work that's happening in Monitor APM, which is one of the two groups within Monitor. And we're going to talk about logging today. So to just talk about what logs are and what they're not trees, obviously, but they are a detailed list of applications, information, system performance, or user activities. They can be useful. Sorry, I have a pop-up that just appeared. They can be useful for keeping track of computer use, emergency recovery, and application improvement. And so they're used by developers when something has gone wrong to see what's gone wrong and to start investigating why. So we had never worked on logs at all as a team in Monitor, but there was an MVC version of logs that was available on GitLab. And I'll just kind of show you what that looked like. So logs were originally accessible off of operations environments, which you can see over here. And then once you got to operations environments, to find the logs, you would click on one of the deployments within the visualization. And at that point, they would be directed to a new page where they could see logs from a specific pod in a specific environment. So they're seeing just one set of logs. And as a Monitor team, since we hadn't done any work on logs at all yet, there were other priorities that had come up. But when the new APM group started in June, there was now space to look at this feature, and there was engineering capacity, again, to re-examine this feature and see how we could improve it. And in picking this up and reviewing where we were at, we suspected there were several things we could improve about the logging experience. One of our thoughts was that the logs were pretty buried in the UI, which you could probably guess from the previous two slides. They are planned to be a very integral part of the Monitor offering, but they were currently pretty hard to find. So we wanted to have them in a place where they could be more easily discoverable. And if they were more easily discoverable, they might be used more and we could get more feedback from users, which could then help guide our improvements. And as you can see here too, though we had the logs, the functionality that we offered was pretty limited. Users could kind of scroll up, they could scroll down, and they could refresh, but that was it. We suspected that users would benefit from having a more robust and useful experience here, but we kind of needed to figure out what that meant. So where should we go next with logs? Since at that point we were a brand new team and we were still waiting for a dedicated PM, we had an interim PM at that point. We wanted to start by talking to people internally and externally to hopefully better understand A, what logging tools people are currently using, B, how reviewing logs fits into their workflows, C, how important logs are to them as a feature, and D, if anyone is even using their pod logs, how useful are they currently? So we talked to some users, and in talking to people, I think the biggest takeaway was how important logs are to their workflow. That they're critical, in fact. And you can see some of these stickies, they're critical, they're a big deal. So that, I think, reminded us that like having them more prominent in the UI would probably be a helpful change that we could make. We also learned about why logs are important in addition to metrics in people's workflow. We had spent a lot of time thinking about metrics, but since we were new to logs, this was useful information for us. So we learned that logs capture a lot of information, but since they capture so much information, users need a way to manage them, search through them, and surface insights from them. And those are all opportunity spaces for GitLab, because at that point we didn't offer any of that functionality. During this research, we also generated a list of competing products that our customers are using and the features they wanted to see in their logging products. And highest on this feature request list was, unsurprisingly, the ability to search through logs. I think my favorite learning from the study, though, that there are essentially two pieces of logs that are important to users. There's the actual logs themselves, which capture all of the events that occur. But there's also the analysis layer on top of that. And it's that analysis layer that users are primarily interacting with. Because of the number and size of logs, it's the analysis layer that's really critical, and that was the layer that was completely missing from GitLab at this point. So from our research, we generated a list of products that our users were already using. So next, we wanted to better understand, really what these products look like, how do they work, and what features do they offer. With logs, there's some giant players in the space. There are entire companies that build logging products. So we started off looking at a few of them just to get a sense of what they offered. So we did a quick look at Elasticsearch, Datadog, and Kibana and Logstash. And in reviewing these competitors, we noticed that rather than just showing a single log, which is what we were doing, they were all displaying a basic table view that aggregated all of the logs from lots of different sources. And having a table like this allowed users to search through logs, filter the logs by specific times. So this is that analysis layer that we learned about from our customer interviews, and that was currently missing from GitLab's offering. So this kind of reminded us that we needed to figure out some way of introducing a log explorer to GitLab. And from a technical point of view, one of the big hurdles to implementing this feature was that we were going to need to find a way to aggregate all of the logs. And logs would need to be aggregated, combined into one place, just in order to do any of that searching and filtering that the competitors in the space are doing and that our users were asking for. So based on what we learned from the research and the competitive analysis, we created a bunch of issues to improve the log offering. And our first step was to increase the visibility of the logs by moving them into the main nav, so they're no longer hidden behind a separate nav item and a data visualization. We also introduced Elasticstack as a GitLab managed app. So introducing Elasticstack is what allows us to aggregate the logs, so that helps us to start introducing all of the search and filter options that our users are asking for. We also started creating designs for a simple log explorer and to start introducing the ability to search and filter the aggregated logs. And I'll just show a couple of the designs here, and these were just for MVCs of a log explorer and what it could look like in our UI. So this sort of log explorer would start to introduce that analysis layer that had been missing from our logs and start moving our logs into more of the table view that we were seeing in our competitors' products. And in designing this, we wanted to use as many of the existing patterns in the GitLab UI as possible. So the experience of searching through logs could be similar to how we search through pipelines and MRs and issues, all of the other things that we search through. And we were also hoping that going in this direction would allow us to utilize existing patterns and components so we could build this faster and ensure a consistent experience across GitLab. And similar to searching and filtering, this is how we wanted to introduce search and filter in a similar way that we do it on the issues page, so that users can quickly narrow down their logs by namespace, pod, or container. So if there's a problem and they need to find a specific log, they can really quickly dive down and find that log. And you'll notice these icons were all placeholders, but Jeremy has been making some beautiful icons for us, so you will see those soon, which is very exciting. And then I kind of wanted to share kind of a bump that a hurdle that we had to jump over as we were implementing this. So sometimes the reality of iterating our way towards solutions is that the intermediate steps don't always look the way that we want them to. And this was very painful for me, which is why I'm sharing it here. we were able to create an aggregated collection of logs, which is a huge step forward. But we weren't able to make any of the visual or UI improvements we had originally planned. So essentially the filtered search component that we were hoping to be able to utilize wasn't available yet. So rather than waiting for that, the team decided to move forward with just using dropdowns as a way of filtering the aggregated logs. And we also had to reuse the existing terminal UI as it was what was already available. We didn't have the capacity to address the visual piece of it as part of the MVC. So where are we now? We have made some updates and we are still working to gradually improve things. So we still have the terminal view. We haven't been able to introduce the table view yet, but we are finally introducing filtered search in 12.9. So all of those drop downs that you saw that we had to do for the MVC are going to disappear, thankfully, and make searching and filtering on this page a lot easier for users and more consistent across the product. And we're also working on introducing time filtering, which will allow users to see logs from a set of predefined time ranges and to view logs from specific days and times. Again, so we're like gradually introducing some of the features that users had asked for and that we had observed competing products were offering. And then the results. So with logs, we've taken some big steps forward, but there's still, obviously, as you can see, a lot of work left to do. Having logs be more discoverable in the UI and having the ability to aggregate logs, which will allow us to search and filter through them, those are huge steps forward for us as a team and for us as a product in terms of what we're offering for logging. And we're not finished with all of this work. We should be in the next couple of milestones. So yeah, I think 12.9 is when that filtered search is going to be introduced. And then I think that to introduce the table view, it hasn't been scheduled yet, but hopefully will follow soon after. And our hope is also that we can continue working towards more of a log explorer view. So more of that table view where information can be more quickly and easily scanned and parsed. And to keep introducing more robust filtering options so that users can really dig down. If there's a gigantic amount of logs and users need to find one specific log amongst that great amount of logs, we need to allow them to be able to do that. And then once these pieces are in place, we can start adding in additional analysis layers on top of all of that. So that's all I had. If you have questions, please voice them. Otherwise, add them to the doc or send me a message. I'd love to hear any thoughts or questions or comments.
I have a comment and a question. My comment is, this is deeply thoughtful work. I'm very impressed. So thank you for sharing this. My question is, pardon me, you did a really good job of laying out like what you learned and then how you prioritized what the next steps are. Can you talk a little bit about how that process happened so that you knew like basically how to prioritize those items?
Sure. I think it was a conversation with the team. I think I would say, we had the user feedback saying users are saying this is really important. And then we also had to balance, so engineering, considerations in terms of technical, like this is what we need, these are the steps that we need to do in order to make this possible. Like for instance, we had to allow Elasticsearch to be installed as a GitLab managed app before we could even aggregate the logs. So from a technical point of view, there were a series of steps that we had to go through in order to have the functionality be available. So it was definitely a continuing conversation between here's what's important from like a user's point of view and from a design point of view, here's what's important from a product and from an engineering point of view. And it was a lot of negotiation and a lot of balancing. And I think, yeah, I don't know if there was like one clear thing that that made the decision for us ultimately, but it was balancing all of those competing considerations and trying to have as many open conversations about all of those things as we could as a team.
So that's a great answer. And that's, I mean, that's how that needs to happen. So great work. And then the other thing I noticed that you're doing is, you know, with your MVC, there was a lot of UX debt created from that, but you've got a plan for it and you're driving that forward. So great.
Yeah.
Wonderful.
Great, thanks. Yeah, yeah. I keep reminding everyone we can't forget about this stuff. Yeah, we'll get there. It might just take a couple more milestones than maybe I hoped originally. We will get there. So, any other thoughts? Okay, I'll stop my share and pass it over to the next person on the agenda.